Item 9, Victoria Street. Okay, so this, Pauline, came from your committee.
Yes.
Do you want to start with a few words of introduction, and then we'll take any introductory comments from staff and then move to questions?
Yep, happy to do that. Okay, so Victoria Street, it's a local distributor road, carries about 15,000 vehicles per day is the traffic volume. It's a designated public transport route and it's prioritised for pedestrians and cyclists. It's worth noting that this project was originally signed off in September 2016. So what's come here today is a similar but slightly revised version of that. We kind of called a halt to it because there was another street that became quite controversial in the city, and we wanted to pause and make sure that we didn't repeat any of those, well, I don't know if you want to call them errors, but situations. So here it comes again, and in the meantime there's been incredible re-engagement. So Victoria Street is actually 13 years past its asset life. It requires all its infrastructure to be replaced. That includes stormwater, lighting, road surfacing, curbs and footpaths, and that constitutes around 80% of this project. So with the engagement this time there were 78 submitters. Drop-in sessions were well attended, and the residents and businesses showed a really good understanding of the project and an understanding of the need for this street to be done because of the reason I've just given. So they were generally pleased with the staff approach to the design and the implementation. In fact, 67% supported this. Now we get to the 67% support because there were 17 fully supported and 50% who supported, but they had some feedback, and that feedback has all been addressed in a positive manner and they are now happy. So basically we've arrived at an agreeable balance that will deliver increased safety for pedestrians and cyclists and improved amenity of the street with the improved LED lighting as well. So there was support for the 30k speed reduction, limit for speed, although spokes actually would have liked us to go down to 10k's, and strong support for the additional 36 trees, which makes a total of 68 trees. And the main concerns were actually in the implementation and delivery of the project, which actually the staff have addressed by assuring them that it will be delivered in sections and just completed in small bits to minimise disruption to businesses. We've been given assurance that this project design is consistent with the transport chapter of the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan, and refer you to 7.6. Currently there are 100 car parks. This plan reduces them to 68 due to providing intersection safety, improved driveway setbacks for visibility, loading zones, tree plantings and bus stops. There has been a road safety audit. There was comments around wanting more car park restrictions on time restrictions on Salisbury Street, and that has been addressed to put in P, I think 120 there, if I remember correctly. So basically the committee approved this plan, but we've requested more options for the two intersections, Victoria Durham and Victoria Kilmore. Staff came back with some options around those, while still maintaining that staff actually support the original recommendation that was passed at the committee. However, I'm going to let staff talk to those options. Actually, there is one option that actually involves a lot of car park removal, which I've been told would require further consultation if we were to support that one. So I'd be actually leaning towards, if we're going to support one of those other options, that it should be one that does not require any further consultation. And just to point out that this was approved in 2016 and has had NZTA subsidy funding approved in 2016 of 50% of the cost. If we delay this any further, and I'm not saying we shouldn't get it right, but if we delay this any further, we could risk losing that funding because we all know the position NZTA is in at the moment. So I'll leave it at that. As I say, the committee did support this. There was a wish to have those intersections, a bit of a look at some further options there, and staff have brought those today, and you'll talk to those. So I hope that's a bit of a roundup.
Yep, that's helpful, thank you. And any introductory remarks from staff on this?
I think that's been pretty thorough, Mr Chair, so I don't think we have too much to add. We do have the other options which we circulated to elected representatives that they can be brought up on screen if we need to discuss those.
All right, great. So the risk of losing funding that we just heard about, how real is that risk?
Yeah, it certainly is real. I think we've reported back to Council the financial constraints that the New Zealand Transport Agency is under. They originally approved funding for this project after we'd approved it, so back in 2016, and they have a desire for these things to be delivered in a reasonably short time frame after that. So we're 3 years down the line, and that doesn't really fit within what would constitute a short time frame. So if there is further delays and we're asked to go out and reconsult, redo the scheme, report back in the new year, there is certainly a very real risk that if they review it, no matter what the scheme itself looks like, that funding simply may not be available. And that's just due to the financial constraints that the agency is in.
So that leads to advice that really we need to make a decision and get on with this.
That is our advice to you, yes, and we do think that risk is real. The agency still could turn around and not fund this project. I think that's unlikely, but I think if we were certainly not to have it approved today and we were obligated or required to go out and do further work, reconsult, and we came back in 6 months' time, I certainly think the risk of it not being funded by them would be a lot greater than it is now.
All right, so the way that this is in front of us today, the council approves requests. There are a number of things that we're requesting you to do. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7's different because it's noting, but 3, 4, 5 and 6 obviously requires further work to be done and reported back. That's the report back that's referred to in paragraph 2.
So in terms of the resolution of ITI around number 3, we have included that in the memo we circulated to councillors.
So that's
yes.
Addressed by the memo that's been circulated. Yep.
5 and 6 set as well.
So also resolutions 4, 5 and 6.
Okay. Great. All right. So let's move to any further questions. Are there any questions? Yanni.
Just in the options, see that you've got the cost of maintaining the existing layout is nil, but if we were just repairing the damage to the road and renewing it as we would do like just a normal street renewal, what would the cost be?
So, maintaining the existing layout in option 3, page 11, we've got that listed as $700,000. Now that's based on an assessment that was carried out by our pavement engineers a year or so ago on assessing the current condition and what we would need to do to the street to fix it up to make it last for 5 years. So the level of intervention or the level of maintenance required would cost $700,000. That's repairs to the road surface, footpaths and other infrastructure.
Was that your question, Councillor Johansson? Or was your question, what would it cost?
I understood that the street is in such a poor condition that it needs to be renewed.
So 80% of the, so 80% of the cost of the 7.5 million that's listed in the report, 80% of that is just replacing the assets that are there. If we didn't, so it's sort of an 80-20 rule on this. We haven't done a full costing for what it would cost to just go back and put everything in on the same alignment, but renew it. But it would be very close to the same amount of money. Yeah.
Right, and if we just spent, if we did nothing and we did the 700,000 just to reseal it, we would still see the services and the road deteriorate.
Yep.
That will create a cost.
There would be an ongoing high level of maintenance cost, ongoing for that street.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have is, I'm trying to understand, we're going to review our transport plan. There's a regional transport plan that's been reviewed. We've got bus priority lanes that I think are being considered in some parts of the city, but I'm just wondering about the bus priority or the PT through this stretch of road, and whether the current plans cater either enough for that, or we've thought about the continuous route that we would want PT to go and how that's informed this design.
So in terms of the plans for public transport into the future, you're correct, we are doing some business cases on them, and you know, we hope that some of those will land a year's hence from now, but the chunky one, for want of a better description, around the mass rapid transit is probably 18 months to 2 years away. We are reviewing a strategic transport plan as well. Council's going through that process, and that's been led by the strategy and transformation team. We don't expect the street to stop being a PT priority corridor, so you know, we've assumed that into the design. But the main PT benefits you get in around the transport network here would be by upgrading the intersections, and we're simply not doing that as part of this project, because that was pushed into the two-lane of the Salisbury-Kilmore one-way pair. So these are really upgrades to the mid-blocks, with some changes to the Papanui-Beeley intersection, but not any other changes to the Salisbury-Kilmore ones, because those have been left to be decided as part of those future work streams around two-lane of those streets. So in essence, there's nothing that we're proposing here today that would hinder or this Victoria Street being used as a core PT route into the future.
We're unlikely to realise benefits of PT improvements though with the current design.
Well, there are some benefits with the current design, but the main benefits you would get for public transport would really be when you upgrade the intersections, and this project does not upgrade those two key intersections. It's really a mid-block streetscape upgrade. That's essentially what we're talking about here.
All right, thank you. Now I've got Dion, Sarah, Mike and Glenn. Dion.
Do you have any idea when the car park building from the casino is likely to still go ahead? Have you had much discussion with them?
Conversations with the casino, I would say that it's imminent, but they haven't lodged a consent as yet. But it's around a 500-storey, multi-storey car park. 500 story. Wow.
That's a big building.
Excuse me.
How deep are those foundations?
Quantity of 500 car parks.
So there'll be 500 car parks there. How many is there at the moment? About 100 or so?
Casino have got on their gravel pit, they've just introduced another 130, which takes their total number to 350 car parks, which they provide 2 hours free parking currently to all people who visit the area. That's to support Victoria Street and its revitalisation and to support the CBD.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, that's all. I just didn't know when it was, if they were still going ahead. And the other one is, I'm not sure if it's in here, but there is an absolute commitment from the delivery teams, or there will be, from the staff down to the delivery teams, to do this in chunks to minimise the disruption to businesses, because that is the biggest concern I have on this. Do we need to specifically spell that out, or we just need your commitment?
Absolutely, you have our
I
commitment
know.
on every project we do to
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah?
I've just got a query as we're going through the boxes on the different criteria and stuff. The criteria 1, climate change impacts. I'm still not completely convinced about how this is working. This one says does not reduce or limit car or bus travel, and therefore there is no reduction of emissions. But you wouldn't want to reduce bus travel to reduce emissions. You'd want to increase bus patronage to reduce emissions. It's kind of, I'm not quite sure who does this and what the criteria are, because surely if we were doing something there that made it not just bus friendly but cycle friendly, you'd encourage more people onto bikes. That might reduce things. It's that kind of, how does that happen?
I think you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're trying to create here is a street for people, and it's going to be, but it's also got, so we want to make it an attractive place for people to, shop, to recreate, to do whatever they need to do there. So hopefully that will create some benefits in terms of them not needing to use their private vehicles. But there's not kind of key bus priority or cycling measures that we're looking to install here that will significantly change the number of people.
But one of the things is like reducing bus travel. And I'm like, you wouldn't want to reduce bus travel. It's just that kind of the wording and things is, I'm not quite sure.
We agree. We need to look at that. So
Yeah. I don't know. Might be one of those things that we get a look at how the new framework is working, and at some point would be
That might
really,
be something
really
good for the new council to pick up.
Yeah, because I don't think this
Yep.
particular bit's working particularly well.
Your main climate change saving is to change the LED down the street,
Yeah.
down there, and the additional trees.
Yeah.
There's no change to volumes of
All right, thank you. Mike and then Glenn. Mike.
I was actually going to move something, so I'm happy for Glenn to ask
All
this
right,
question.
so, yeah, I'll come back to you as soon as we're done with questions. I'll come back to you. Glenn.
Thank you. Can you give us a traffic count for other streets coming into the city off Beeley? So we've got Fitzgerald, Barbados, Manchester, Colombo, Durham, in comparison to Victoria. So I'm fascinated over, I totally get the angular nature of it, matching High Street on the other side, which gives it its particular character and amongst the grid pattern. Totally understand that, but it's not the only street going south into the city. Have you got a traffic count? So that's Fitzgerald, Barbados, Manchester, Colombo, Durham, or even where it rates, and including the public transport count for that. I've been looking through the report, but
I don't think we have those to hand.
No.
I happen to know that Madras Street is about 10,000 vehicles per day.
Okay.
I would expect Barbados would be something pretty similar.
yeah.
But I can't give you the other ones.
Okay.
We could probably find them out and distribute them via a memo if needs be.
And what's Victoria again? What would that?
It's about 9,700.
9,000. Okay. You've also got Manchester and Colombo, Durham would be highish too, I would think, as a dedicated one-way street.
Look,
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think Montreal and Durham would be probably higher than that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Are there any further questions? No. Okay, Mike.
Thanks.
So you've got
I'm happy to just change out 3 for what I've sent through to Sam, and then move the bulk of it.
So move the whole lot,
Yeah,
but with 3
replace the-
removed and your new wording in place of, well, 3 gone and your new wording in there.
Yeah, and just for clarity, for the intersection Victoria, Durham, Kilmore, to put in brackets layout A.
Layout A. Okay, that's fine.
It's the one that
And
doesn't remove
original paragraph 3 of the committee recommendation is removed.
Yeah, and everything else to stay.
And that's because the additional wording deals with the matter that's raised in 3, but more specifically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And layout A is the one that doesn't actually remove car parks.
Okay. So Mike is moving, Pauline is seconding. Great. So yeah, does that lead to any further questions, Phil?
Yeah, look, I understand the concept. I just want to make sure about the feasibility of this regarding any need for further consultation than what we've had. If the staff could let us know there. If we adopt that amendment or change, sorry?
We don't believe we need
It shouldn't. So that should better go ahead without further consultation.
So if this passes as it's put at the moment, there's no requirement for further consultation, no delay. Okay?
We can get a copy of it up on screen so that council is aware of what the layout A looks like.
I think that might be useful.
It's very similar to the existing situation. Hence, we don't believe there's a need for additional consultation. Sam, if you scroll up a bit, it'll put the other way.
The main change is the top traffic lane was originally a sharrow to be shared with bikes and cars, and now there's a separate bike lane, which is just a painted line.
And is the only
Yep.
disadvantage
Yep.
Lane width?
The lane widths are slightly narrowed,
Okay.
but they are still wider than what is existing.
Okay.
All right. So does this lead to any further questions? No? Okay, so this has been, yeah, Phil.
I'm also assuming, just from discussion, that in fact it doesn't alter the pedestrian area either.
No, it doesn't seem it.
No?
Doesn't?
Okay. That's fine. All right, so moved and seconded. Is there any debate on this? Yanni?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is just symbolic of the whole central city plan, the accessible city plan, the transport plan, and it just seems to me that part of the dilemma here is that we're actually creating a whole bunch of streets that don't serve any one particular purpose very well, because we're trying to put 5 different purposes on them: pedestrians, cyclists, PT, motorists, and businesses. So I have real concerns about the design that we've seen. I don't. If you look at Montreal Street, for example, I'm absolutely concerned to have 2 lanes of traffic cutting across a cycleway that goes straight ahead. I'm also really concerned that the money being spent on this is more than what's needed to actually just do the street renewal. For those of us who represent parts of the city where we can't even get street renewals, or when we do get them, we can't extend them into places like the red zone down North Avon Road, which would make a lot of sense. This just seems a luxury that we can't afford at this moment in time. So I would support just doing the renewal of the street. I can't support all the extra things that are being done, A, because I don't believe that we're going to get good safety outcomes, and I don't think we're going to get an efficient and effective transport network.
Thank you. Pauline and then Dion.
Look, I'm really happy to support this today. It's been a long time coming, and I'm sure staff will breathe a sigh of relief should this council choose to support this today, which I'm certainly hoping we will. It's going to be wonderful to see Victoria Street revitalised. It's a fantastic area of town, and as I say, the staff have done an absolutely amazing job with the engagement, especially you, Stefan, who's so lovely with people, so patient with them and so clear in the way that you talk to them and tell them what's going on and what's planned. And the vibe was really, really positive as far as I was concerned. And also, not only are they going to be very careful in the implementation, that they do it in bits and pieces and get in and get out with minimal disruption, minimal cones I hear, but I think you're planning to set up a working group so that there's communication is flowing at all times to give businesses a heads up early so that they can plan with their customers and with their communications on what's going to happen and how to get to their business, etc. So all in all, I think this is a really good outcome today, and I really can't wait to see this actually completed. So please support this today.
Thank you. So then we've got...
Dion.
Sorry.
Dion.
Dion and then James. Dion.
I'm happy to support this today. A funny little story actually around this street. It was the first thing in community board that came to us when I was first elected, and then it got on ice. And the pursuit of perfection has taken 3 years, and we still have no perfection. And it's 3 years later we're making a decision, and I hope 3 years later we can actually get this decision and actually see some boots on the ground and the work done. So yeah, we could muck around for another 3 years in the pursuit of perfection, but I don't think we're ever going to get there.
Does it exist?
It doesn't exist. We're going to need to do this street one way or another. The infrastructure on that street is toast. It is awful, and I've spoken to so many businesses down there. As the councillor, the Victoria Neighbourhood Association, it's not perfect, but most people are just like, get on with it. For crying out loud, it's taken 3 years of you guys talking about it. Get on with it. So please support it today. It isn't going to ever be perfect. It's taken 3 years to get to this point after we first signed off on it. But from what I gather is most people on the street are actually okay with us doing this. And I get the point around the cost. But at the moment, it's only going to cost the City Council maybe $3 million versus if we wait, it'll cost the full amount, and then there's operational costs on maintenance. And the fact of the reality is we need to fix the drainage and that other infrastructure that's down there. So please do support it. And the one thing that I'm going to ask staff is make sure that we can find some good places to put more tree cover, because that is probably the biggest, and I know it is a resolution there, that is probably the biggest request that the Residents Association around that area are asking for, is make sure that we can get good green in the space. But yeah, please do support it because it's taken far too long.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. James and then Glenn. James.
So I've heard from many of the business owners on Victoria Street, including one that has 4 separate tenancies along the stretch, a couple that have got a very large footprint of office space, 3 of them in fact, and I've spoken at length to multiple building owners there, including the largest developer on the street over the past 7 to 8 years, 7 to 8 years, and they've all told me the same thing. They're all consistent, and it's something that I find quite concerning, in that this significant number of highly affected parties falls into the generally support with feedback category in the report. So that's the 50% that's referred to. And these particular stakeholders are not in this category because they're 99% across the line. They're in that category because they vehemently believe that investment in this street is needed, but they do not believe that the recommended proposal that's being presented to us and that the removal of the on-street car parking is a viable trade-off. So I think that that's a concerning element with this. They'd like to see planting, they'd like to see the streetscape enhancements, they would like to see an upgrade occur, but their tenants and customers are not telling them that the problem with the street is a lack of bicycle access or concerns around bike or bus access. The consistent concern that they have from their tenants and customers is that car parking is the major problem and there isn't enough of it. So knowing what we know, which is that car parking, particularly the available on-street car parking provision, is problematic here, I find it deeply troubling that we would spend $7 million to remove 1/3 of those on-street car parks. So I'm all for encouraging alternate modes of transport, however it can't be done at the direct expense of how the majority of people get around. So a renewal of Victoria Street needs to occur, that's abundantly clear. However, I feel that the least worst option today is to leave it as it is, ring-fence the funding and do something that helps but doesn't hinder the stakeholders in the street. I think the problem that I see with the recommended option is yet again, and Yanni's alluded to it, that the desire to cram every mode of transport under the sun into one street, coupled with road narrowing and then a significant removal of on-street car parking. So I think the risk of butchering the street and harming the businesses here that have made a significant investment is higher than the risk of losing an associated funding contribution.
Sarah. Sorry, I've got Glenn and then Sarah. Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I totally recognise that Victoria Street has a unique part in our street layout, our geography, and matches High Street on the other side, bringing distinctiveness to our grid pattern in the city. And it's one of the gateway streets, but I am curious as to the actual traffic patterns into the city compared to the other major roads that I pointed out before. In terms of the tourist experience, it's known that the visitor and resident experience need to be aligned. And so if we're going to have our visitors and residents to the city enjoying coming into the 4Avs, into the CBD, in my view, the roads leading into it need to be as much of an enjoyable experience as possible. It's good driving down Hills Road now. Beautiful, smooth. And this is what we want for our streets in the suburbs as well. If you're coming from New Brighton at the moment, it's quite an experience. I know several cars, whether on that road or others, they've had their chassis bent, brakes have gone, tyres, etc. With Victoria Street, I do support it, as I realise going for a much lower option could result in throwing good money after bad and negating the whole of life cost approach to this. So I support doing it once, getting it right. We need to obviously ensure we acquire the NZTA subsidy so that the net ratepayer cost is negligible, and it's good to read in the report that it won't have much impact on the rates. So let's do it once, but I echo the call to please let's get our suburban streets fixed. Thanks.
Sarah.
Thank you. I know that car parking is always a fraught issue in Christchurch, in fact everywhere around the country, around the world, but it's a perceived concern rather than a real concern, and cycle lanes are the easy target, and they have been in Christchurch for some years now. The reality is, on Victoria Street, there are already cycle lanes. We're not taking out car parking to put in cycle lanes, so don't use cycle lanes as a target, please. There is a car parking building on the way that's going to hold 500 cars. There are already 300 off-street ones there now. And look at New Regent Street, not a car park in sight, and it's thriving. And it's thriving because cars don't spend money. Cars cost money. People spend money, and the more that they have in their pockets, the better. Let's remember that shopping doesn't happen in a vacuum. Shopping happens on the planet, and we need a planet to be shopping on.
Thank you. Phil.
I also want to support this strongly. I think we have to be really careful of being factual, and the report is, and I think that overall the discussion has been, I think it gets a bit over-emotive and some of the references that have been made. And Sarah has rightly pointed out, in fact, 500 car parks, really, I mean, that will, if people want to continue to drive cars, and most of us do sometimes, there's going to be ample parking there in the future. Instead of kind of like, as has been implied by some, that this would ruin the street, I see this whole plan as giving a whole lot of life to the street, including active transport, which is all about people living healthier. So I just think it's really important that we don't get an over-emotive sort of response to this. In fact, it's taken a long time to get to where we are. I'm really asking councillors too to thoroughly support this, and including the additions for safe cycling.
Thank you. Mike, I assume you'll want to wrap up the debate. So, yeah, I'm pleased that we've got this here, and I'm pleased that we're about to make a decision on it today. Victoria Street's one of my favourite central city streets, not least because it's got a couple of my favourite businesses on it, and I'm pleased to hear that the building owners obviously have been part of the consultation, but that the business owners also have been engaged with and will continue to be engaged with throughout the process. Disruption to small businesses in neighbourhoods like this can be significant, and it's really important, and I note the commitment to do so, that we really engage with the owners and staff in those businesses on a daily basis, if needs be, to reduce the impact of what can be quite damaging work to them. But this is positive for Victoria Street, it's positive for the city. I mean, this is another case, I think, of stop talking and start doing. Dion's comment, Victoria Street on ice, almost sounds like some kind of stage show or something. But it's good that we're moving on from that, and we're actually getting on with doing something good down there. Either we believe in modal shift and we believe in getting more people onto public transports, onto bikes and walking, or we don't. don't. Yes, we need to leave room for cars, but we need to get that in balance. I believe we've got a scheme here that, whilst it may not be perfect, is capable of being delivered and will be a significant improvement. And the fact that we've got the ability to make a decision to get on with that today, after what has been some time talking about it, now's the time to really start doing the doing. So I'm pleased to be able to support this today. Mike, I'll come to you to close the debate.
Thank you. And I think pretty much everything's been said. But look, as an everyday user of Victoria Street, I'm well placed to say that that street is stuffed and it does need to be renewed. I guess some of the comments have been a little bit concerned. It's disappointing that someone calls out the budget for this when we just went through an annual plan and they didn't mention it then, which I think was the right time to actually call out budgets instead of doing it right the 11th hour. This design, I actually don't see much improvement for people biking down there, so it's good to get a little bit of a better outcome at some of the key intersections. It's meant to be a street for people, but actually I think we've compromised to try and get the right balance, and we've compromised that to ensure that actually there is car parking down there and actually it's easy access for cars. We actually had a very robust debate at the ITE committee about this, and I accept the recommendation from the ITE committee, and so that's why I moved that with that slight change. We did have an opportunity, I think, with Victoria Street to actually create a true destination, especially with the one-way streets just to the east of it. But what really needs to happen is for us to get on and get this street sorted, because it is falling apart and it's shocking. To say that car parking is an issue is not correct. We know that actually in the area of Victoria Street there are hundreds of car parks, and perhaps the messaging is actually not right at the moment if people don't realise that. So look, I'm happy to move this. I think we just need to get on with it and get this street sorted.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No.
So that's, who are the noes? Yanni and James. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you, and thank you to staff for